everyone. Welcome to the February Downtown Madison Inc. Advocacy Update. I'm Jason Elster, president of Downtown Madison Inc., and we are here, as we are every month, to give you updates on things that are happening in the advocacy world in downtown, plus hear from our partners and our sponsors for this event. We are so excited again this year to have our major series sponsors, our friends at Cinerif, just a fantastic organization, and our good friends at Hush Blackwell and the Fiore companies, who are our major sponsors here again for the advocacy update for about the fifth year in a row. We really do appreciate your support. We've got friend of the pod, Senior Vice President of Business Development for Cinere, Chris Gillings, with us again. Chris, how's it going, my friend?
Jason, it's going well, particularly as we're getting a little warmth and a hint that spring is coming, right?
Very much so. Not maybe not this morning. My bike ride in, my cheeks are still rosy red, if you can't notice, but it things are turning a corner. How is everything at Cinere?
Going well, Jason. We're trying to, like I think a lot of folks, measure what the landscape's going to look like in 2026, particularly in our core area, which is housing. But even more broadly, we're trying to plan some of the efforts that we need to make sure that housing is in the minds of not only our federal representatives, but also in our state legislatures to make sure that folks have awareness. And I think having Andrew here to talk a little bit today about some of the advocacy work that honestly, one of the main reasons that we support DMI is because of what fantastic advocates you and the organization are for the city of Madison, and particularly for downtown as the engine that makes the entire city go. But on top of that, we're doing some of the same right now. I'm planning my Hill visits for April this year. Which is something that we have tried to focus on a lot at Cinere, is getting each of our state or regional area focused folks out to meet with the electeds so that they are right on top of, and their staffs are right on top of, and have full awareness of what's impacting housing right now. And there are certainly enough things, not only for downtowns, but for housing as well, that we need to raise our voices for. So glad to hear this conversation today, Jason.
Well, Chris, as always, it's good to see you. Now, when are you going to DC in April? Because the International Downtown Association will also be doing our Hill visits in April. When are you going to be there?
I think it's the first week April that I'm going to be there.
No, no, that's not going to work for us. No, we're
I
done.
wish it was later because DC will be even that much nicer by the
It
time
is.
later in April rolls around.
Well, but maybe you'll see the cherry blossoms at that time.
I may. Be fun.
Well, Chris, thank you for all of your support in your organization. You all do amazing work at so many great projects in housing, but also in the advocacy work. It matters when we send folks to DC to see our elected officials. So, Chris, thank you very much
Absolutely.
for all your support.
As always, Jason, happy to do it.
We appreciate it. And as Chris mentioned, our guest today is going to be Andrew Goldberg, who heads up all government relations for the International Downtown Association. He'll be with us in a minute or two after the update of things that are happening in the DMI advocacy world. Andrew Goldberg is a great friend of the Advocacy Update, and this is his second appearance. I think he might be one of the first people to have appeared multiple times. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll call it a good thing. Speaking of good things, we've got many things happening in the advocacy world in DMI right now. We want to highlight a few, and of course, make sure that you all are aware of what we're working on and to help you get you involved in local issues that matter to you as individuals, but also to your organizations. First, we are excited to have signed on to Renew the Blue, which is an initiative of our partners at the Clean Lakes Alliance to help implement many of their strategies. It's an excellent group of leaders across many public and private organizations and many, many governments, really ensuring that we have clean lakes, which are vitally important for the success of our entire community, but in particular to the downtown. We are so thankful for the leadership of James Ty and everyone at Clean Lakes Alliance, led by their chair, Sopan Shah. We are excited to be a part of the Renew the Blue team. We're meeting with them about every month to help find ways to implement many strategies that they have to clean our lakes. Again, proud partners and proud to support their work. Another big item on the docket in advocacy is Regent Street and the road reconstruction. The city is going through their process, and about 6 weeks ago had a public information meeting where they gave their preferred alternative. We've been working with our friends at the Regent Street Group and the Regent Street Business Association to help lead that effort to make sure that the road is best for everybody. And we've seen significant compromise from the original preferred alternative, and we will see in the next week or so what the city is going to move forward through the Transportation Commission at their meeting in early March. This is a vitally important project. It is a huge corridor, cuts right through the downtown, right in the heart of the isthmus. And admittedly, it's a street that doesn't really work for anyone right now. And let's try to create a street that works for so many more, for peds, for the businesses, for cars, for transit, you name it, to make sure that people have access to get to and then also through the street. Important corridor that links Camp Randall Stadium, Regent Street, also links the Cole Center into downtown. We are paying close attention to this. If this is an issue that is important to you, please send us a note, and we hope you can join any of the several conversations we're having to zealously advocate for the best preferred alternative for this important road construction project. Last up, DMI is deep in the local government endorsement process. Again, this year, we are hosting 10 different elections in the city of Madison. 10 of the 20 Alder seats are up. This is a change from a few years ago, and now all the even seats are in the even years, and the odd seats are in the odd years. So we are working on the even districts, which disproportionately has several downtown districts, namely the 2nd, the 4th, the 6th, and the 8th. And so we are paying close attention to all 10 races, but in particular, those 4 races. There are 3 contested races of the 10. We are interviewing almost every one of the candidates. We are excited about this process, and we should be putting forward our endorsed candidates in the next week or so. So look in early March for those candidates which DMI is endorsing. It's an important part of our process to get to know the candidates so the candidates get to know DMI and they feel that we are a resource and vice versa. We are also a resource to them. So we hope that this process continues to go well, which it is, but please do look out for our endorsed candidates in early March. All right, this brings us to our main event. Here today, we've got our good friend, Andrew Goldberg, who is the founder and principal of Agora, and he helps lead the International Downtown Association's U.S. Government Affairs Committee, which is a phenomenal committee, except for the chair. Andrew, let's just get right into it. Why did you decide that I was the best person to be chair?
Good question. I do, before answering that, I do want to, first of all, say I'm really happy to be here. You mentioned this is my second time doing this. What I want to know is if I do this 3 more times, will I get a 5 timers jacket like on Saturday Night Live?
You
Um,
will. And that actually
okay,
comes
good.
with there's a lot of cash in one of the pockets too. So
Perfect.
let's try to
That's
get
always
you
good.
to, yes, it's a very nice
Great.
coat. Very nice coat. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. I didn't say code. It's like one that people have to share, but that's good.
Is
So
it,
yeah,
it's like the master's jacket? Like you
yeah,
you can't
yeah.
actually take the one.
I
That
think
would
the
be
one is
well.
just
Like
passes on.
like
Stanley
John
Cup
Rahm
it
is a
goes to.
very different size than Rory McIlroy or something like
Yeah.
that.
I don't know how that
Yeah.
works, but no, yeah. So obviously, as Jason said, I oversee U.S. government relations for the IDA here in Washington, D.C. It's a great process. We did make the strategic mistake of appointing Jason Ilstrup as chair. No, that was actually one of the best things we did.
Oh,
I'm not just
please.
saying that because he's offering me money. No, Jason is
Only if
everything
you
that
come
he.
on 5 times, not
Yeah,
today.
I'm a man
Not today.
at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know how he does because he does an insane amount, for Madison there, but in also leading this effort at the national level for IDA and providing the guidance, the leadership, the support, and most importantly, the cheese curds. I think it really has been no, it's been a great process, and really happy to talk talk about it here with you today.
Well, Andrew, pleasant, those nice compliments will get you very far. So I appreciate it, but it's been a phenomenal effort. This is a relatively new effort. We're going to get into it and why this is important to IDA. But I just want to say thank you to you. Thank you also to the leadership of David Downey, who's the president and CEO of the overall organization, and the two past chairs before me. One I was happy to co-chair with Zach from Greensboro, North Carolina, and then John from Seattle. So they've left amazing work. But as you mentioned, and as I just mentioned, advocacy is relatively new to the International Downtown Association. First, can you go over what is the International Downtown Association and why did you all decide to get involved more in advocacy?
Great question. Well, so first of all, the IDA is and I'd say national and really international organization for urban place management organizations like Downtown Madison. Has thousands of members across the United States, Canada, in growing numbers in Europe and South Africa, other places as well. And its job is like any sort of association is really to provide best practices, resources, education, research, all those things that help place management organizations do their job and do it better and address the challenges you face, but also the opportunities that help create these really vibrant, clean, safe, inclusive, exciting downtowns that are so important for not just the local economy, but regional economies. As you mentioned, one thing that they hadn't done for quite a long time directly was advocacy. IDA is about 70 years old or so, but never really did advocacy in any concerted, sustained way before. And like with a lot of organizations and efforts, it started because of a need coming out of the pandemic in 2020, 2021, when we saw this big drop off in commercial space being utilized, and with the remote economy taking on, there was a sense that we need to do something. And so, from that effort back in 2021, IDA started on this journey of creating a federal government relations program, working initially primarily on legislation to address that issue of vacant office space, but then expanding beyond that to other issues. So back in 2021, we formed or IDA formed a policy committee, which I think you were on. You're one of the originals of that group. I came on in 2021 to help them as a consultant. My work is do government relations consulting for a number of different organizations. As IDA likes to tell me, IDA is my favorite client. But I tend to agree
What are
that
your other clients then? What are you saying about them?
well, again, as I tell all my clients, you are my favorite. So there's no interest as special as yours. No, but working with IDA, so in 2021, creating this process in 2022, we did the first fly-in where we had members of the committee come into Washington, meet with senators, House members, um, saw that it really resonated that policymakers listen to the folks in downtown because they are such an important part of the economy of the cities of the culture. In 2022, we developed our really first big policy agenda, and we've continued to grow from then, looking and working on issues that really affect and impact downtowns. And I'll also add, at the same time we're doing this, on the Canadian side, just north of the border, there's a very similar effort that's been going on for about the same amount of time, working in Ottawa to advocate there. But really, it's there's a saying in Washington: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think the idea is that there are a lot of decisions being made on policy that affects downtowns, and so it's important for IDA members to be at the table. And thanks to the work that Jason and all these other volunteers and the staff and leadership, IDA now is more so at the table than ever before to really help to speak up for downtowns.
Well, the work of the federal government absolutely impacts downtown. It impacts downtown Madison. It impacts downtown Seattle, downtown Greensboro. It doesn't matter. It really does. But what IDA is able to do is provide some bandwidth and a collection of downtowns from across the country that really can have impact federally that we may not be able to have as just a single organization. And that collection of downtowns really does make a difference. Andrew, let's get into what the priorities are right now for IDA. What is IDA advocating for? I know we have a trip to Capitol Hill, which we mentioned just a few minutes ago, coming here in April. What are we going to be advocating for, and what are the important issues that are facing downtown that we need to see more work from our friends at the federal government?
Well, it's a great question. I'd say there are probably four big buckets that we're looking at right now, and they're all interrelate to each other. One, which we talked about already, is office space, and the reality that there is a new normal, that people are not working in the office as much as they are. At the same time, there's also this desperate need for more housing, which you've talked about. And so we've been working for a number of years on legislation, bipartisan legislation, that's called the Revitalizing Downtowns and Main Streets Act, that would create a federal tax credit for converting unused office space into housing, including affordable housing. And it's something we've worked on with the Conference of Mayors, with the real estate community. We have, I said, support on the Hill from both parties. And so looking at this as an opportunity to really address two issues, excess office space, but also the need for housing. And the reality that conversions can address that, but they are expensive. There's first costs. So looking at a way that tax credits can help to address some of those issues. So that's kind of one big bucket. The second one, like I mentioned, is homelessness and housing. And I will say we've done surveys of members, what their biggest issues are, and across the board, across the country, homelessness has, for the last 5 years or so, been a top issue. And so we work very closely with a lot of our allies in the homelessness and housing advocacy sectors on making sure that there's adequate funding for HUD, for their homelessness grant programs. We just recently have gone through a big effort. There was a controversy about how HUD was going to provide money or not provide money for certain kinds of permanent supportive housing, where we worked in tandem with a lot of the homelessness groups and actually got good results out of Congress, where they sort of pushed back on HUD and made sure that the funding continues to get out there. So looking at homelessness and also housing generally, including looking at ways that we can create more workforce housing or middle housing, missing middle housing, to help kind of folks who are not eligible for assistance but can't quite afford market rate housing, which is a problem in a lot of downtowns. So that's a big piece of it. Public safety is a really important aspect of that. That we're looking at for downtowns. And even though the crime rates and the numbers show things are improving, we still have issues to deal with, and there are perceptions, of course, about crime that keeps people away from downtowns. One big issue we're working on is something about organized retail crime. Over the last 5, 10 years, we've seen a real change in the nature of shoplifting, where it used to be a random person sort of just on their own kind of taking stuff. We've seen more organized groups that are oftentimes backed by interstate or even transnational criminal organizations that are doing these smash and grabs, which are more persistent, more violent. And so we've been working on legislation that would provide resources from the federal government to help states and localities and bids, everybody, address these issues. Also looking to make sure that Congress continues to provide funding for grants to cities. I know that Madison has received funding under something called the Byrne JAG, Justice Assistance Grants Program, in the past, to help with a number of issues related to crime prevention and safety. So making sure that's front and center. And the last issue I'll mention is something that's happened a lot the past year or so, which is we've seen in a lot of places in the country more certainly law enforcement federal activities in cities. Last year, you had a number of cases where National Guards were deployed in cities. We've seen situations with ICE, all the things that happened in Minneapolis at the start of the year, and that does impact bids in a number of ways. Certainly, when you have uncertainty and unrest and things like that, that affects the ability to bring people to downtown, to get people there. A lot of businesses in downtowns have been worried. What if the immigration people come? What can we do? Workers not showing up to work. And so we've been working to both educate policymakers about whatever your views are on immigration, those things. Here are some of the impacts. And here's some of the ways we can help downtowns make sure that they can respond and address to this and continue keeping their downtowns as safe, inclusive, inviting, vibrant places. And there are probably many other issues as well that have been touched, but in terms of our big priorities and what we'll talk about with Congress, those are kind of the four really main buckets.
You talked a lot in the middle. Number two priority was not necessarily based on order, but number two priority you mentioned was on homelessness. And recently, I think there's been a win. You talked about it with HUD and the continuum of care. There was a significant amount of uncertainty, particularly in organizations working in homelessness. We heard it from our city, from our county. We heard it from many of the organizations that there was uncertainty with the funding, uncertainty with the rules, what the future was going to look like. And IDA, amongst hundreds of other organizations, was able to really get through to Congress to say, hold on a second here, we need some clarity. And in fact, was able to get more funding that could potentially be going to local sources or local cities like here in Madison. Why is it important to build that larger coalition? And why did you think there was some success when it came to homelessness with this current Congress?
Well, I think the two are kind of related. I mean, the importance of coalitions, it's the same thing as you said about kind of IDA's role to kind of bring together voices of downtowns from all over the country to speak with a more loud, clearer voice. By joining in coalitions, you expand your voice and your power. There are, let's face it, there are thousands of organizations and people coming up to Capitol Hill to lobby Congress on those issues. There's a lot of noise. The more you can work together in a larger group and bring that megaphone to really highlight critical issues, it helps. It also helps to show that there is a variety or even diversity in who's speaking. It's one thing when homelessness advocacy organizations come up and ask Congress to provide more funding for homelessness. Of course, you expect that. When the business community says, hey, this is important to us too, it is important to us to have the resources to help address this problem. I think members of Congress listen more because they see it being a much more broad-based effort and the need being more broad-based. And that's what we kind of bring to the table is a somewhat different voice, the same issues, the same ask, but coming at it from a different angle and saying, yeah, this is not just the usual suspects asking for more funding. It's this case, the business community, people who work in making downtowns prosperous and vibrant are saying the same thing. So that's why we really work in coalition. We're not the biggest voice in Washington, as effective and powerful as Jason Ilstrup is as an advocate, and he is. There are many voices,
Right.
and so well, again, I want to make sure I get that money. But it's important for us
Keep getting it.
to join together. uh, but by the same token, you ask, how did it work? And I think that's part of it is by coming in together and being focused on this issue and being able to talk very plainly and very clearly. So what happened, without going into all the details, the HUD had basically create a situation where a number of continuums of care, a lot of them might have lost their funding this year, this even the first 6 months of the year, which means they could not work on programs for permanent supportive housing, all the wraparound services. By one study, 170,000 people could have been out on the street because of what HUD was doing. And you tell that to Congress and its members of both parties. This was a bipartisan effort in Congress to say we have a real problem. And these programs work, and they work not just in cities, but in small towns and in suburbs, everywhere. It makes a difference. And in this case, that is exactly what happened. And so we not only got, as Jason said, more funding, we also make sure that funding gets out the door and that all of these organizations that do this important work in Madison and everywhere will get the funding. Now, the issue isn't over because HUD still might change the rules. There may be issues as we go. So we have to stay upon this. This is not a one and done, we just walk away. But we had a really good victory because, again, all the groups came together and were very clear about what the problem was and what our ask was. And that's an advocacy. That's how it works.
Well, it's a massively important issue for any downtown, but certainly for Madison. We're seeing, unfortunately, record numbers of different people experiencing homelessness using our shelter. You talk to our good friends at Porchlight, you talk to our good friends at the Beacon and Catholic Charities. I mean, their numbers are way higher than they ever would have planned for. And unfortunately, I think the situation is going to get worse before it gets better, but we need as much resource as we can from all different sources. And I think that's why federal advocacy is so important. But I wanted to say a big
Yeah.
thank you to many of the nonprofits in Madison and the local governments, the county and the city in particular, that do so much for people experiencing homelessness. But we're going to need to
Yeah.
do certainly more.
And I do want to add to that. One thing, it's so important for cities like Madison to be involved because on this issue, for example, people expect, yes, that homelessness is an issue in Los Angeles, in New York, San Francisco, the big cities, Chicago. When they hear that it's happening in smaller cities, it's happening, in places you might not expect, like Davenport, Iowa, Madison, Wisconsin, Greensboro, North Carolina, I think people start to listen and realize, oh, this is a much bigger problem. And so having those voices there from those cities saying, yeah, this is an issue for us too, is so important. And having the bids there who are working on this on the street, on the front lines, helps give it these asks, these requests a lot more credibility because we're folks who know what's happening and have solutions.
And obviously, there was some success with at least this continuum of care continuation. That was a hard thing to say, but we really,
Continuum of
yes, there you go. We were very excited about that. Small win. Where are there other areas you think downtowns could see a win in this legislative session, knowing, and we're going to get to a question a little later, that obviously the 2026 elections are looming over everything.
Exactly. Well, there are a couple of areas, and yes, as to start with, we're in an election year. Congress is very narrowly divided. Both chambers are. It's hard to get legislation through, but there are some opportunities. One that I just mentioned before was retail crime, and a bill called the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, or CORCA, which would can create resources for at the federal level to help cities and states deal with organized retail crime. The bill passed the House on a unanimous vote back in January. It's moved to the Senate. There's still some things they're working out, things like that, but we could see the next few weeks it pass through the Senate, which means that it goes to the president to be signed into law. And I'll add that if it's not done by the time that IDA comes to Washington in April, it's certainly one thing we're going to be asking our senators to make sure it goes through. So that's something. I think opportunities on funding. So very soon in the next few months or weeks rather, the White House will submit its budget request for the next fiscal year to Congress. The request last year cut a lot of funding from a lot of programs, including things like the Burn JAG grants that have been helpful to Madison, homelessness programs, a number of things. Congress basically said thanks but no thanks on a bipartisan basis and restored a lot of the funding or put back a lot of the funding that the administration had wanted to cut. And so I think there's opportunities there. With that, another piece that I'll mention, and I think Jason knows a lot about this, but it's something that's really important, is bids and others can go to Congress and ask for what's known as congressionally directed spending. It used to be called earmarks, but that has kind of a bad connotation. So they got rid of it for a while. It came back as congressionally directed spending. And this is money that Congress provides directly for certain programs. So we're going to give X amount of money to this city, this organization, this bid for a specific project. In a sense, kind of bypassing the agency grant making process. Some people don't like this because they feel it's pork barrel spending. I will say the way the process works now, they've reformed it, so projects have to have a lot of support, grounded in policy. There certainly are a lot of guardrails, but that is a way that bids can access funding for public safety, for community development, for all kinds of transportation projects and things like that. That process is going to be starting up soon for the next year, and so ideally, we're providing resources to bids for that. And the last thing I'll just mention is we're also working on legislate or policy ideas that really help put bids in the driver's seat or provide resources to them to help address this constellation of issues around public safety, homelessness, crisis of substance use and mental health that we're seeing in a lot of downtowns. A lot of programs in the federal government are very siloed. Money goes to different places for different reasons, and we're looking at working out a way to create, kind of a pilot project funded by the federal government that could get some of that funding out to bids. We just David, you mentioned David Downey, the president CEO, and I were on the Hill yesterday talking about it a bit. It's going to take some time to get there and build up to build this, but it's an opportunity to really showcase what it is that bids do and how they can be part of the solution.
Look, there's a joke there with Corca. Barry
Right.
Manilow had a very famous song about Corca, didn't he? Oh, that was the Copa. That
That was
was
the COPA. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
We have a
Well,
very
it's just,
we clearly have an older audience if I'm telling Barry Manilow jokes here today.
yeah. Yeah. Well, Jason, people don't know, Jason was a showgirl for a while with
There
feathers in
we
his hair
go. There
and
we
a dress
go.
cut down to there. Yeah. No, sorry.
This is why I love Andrew because he's got good jokes. I do not. I'm just a
No, I
setup
don't
guy.
have
I'll
good
just be
jokes.
your
Yeah.
Ed McMahon all day long. A couple more questions we have for you. How can organizations like IDA or members of IDA get involved in the issues that you are talking about and those priorities you just went over a few minutes ago?
Well, first would be to clone Jason so that Jason was in charge of every other bid, which actually, I don't know, that may be that'd be a lot of energy, I think.
Be a
That'd be
lot of
very,
energy.
imagine
Too
like a
much.
room, an auditorium with like 1,000 Jasons. Wow, that would be very exciting. No, I mean, and again, I'm not just saying this to be nice or anything, but certainly the support that DMI through Jason and the leadership and others has been enormous. I mean, look, I think one of the best ways, first of all, is of course to let us know what's happening um, on all these issues. We're here in DC, and of course there are plenty of bids in DC as well we work with, but knowing what's happening on the ground, on the street, helps us to know. So if federal programs or funding is being cut, or if there are emerging trends related to housing, homelessness, any of these issues, letting us know about those, and so we can kind of figure out, is there an opportunity, is there a policy, an advocacy connection to do work, that's really helpful. I think being part of our advocacy network, which is something that IDA launched back in 2023, I think. Madison is a member. It's a way that helps connect other members to each other, helps us get the word out. So, for example, if there's an issue and let's say Senator Baldwin is a key vote on an issue that we know, we can go talk to Madison and Milwaukee and say, hey, can you reach out because she's a critical voice on that. Having that all over the country helps us make sure that we can get the message out. And the last thing, I think also what you're already doing, but what other groups can do is don't forget state and local. And I think it's great that DMI does so much at the state level, certainly being down the block from the Capitol, but also on local issues because there are federal issues that are important, but there certainly are state and local issues as well. One thing that IDA is doing this year is beginning to look at how can we support our bids in the work that they do state and locally. It's not that IDA is going to kind of parachute into Madison and start, telling the government what to do there, but what kind of resources can we provide? How can we help bids in advocating at those levels as well to make sure that we're kind of really hitting all the levels and educating folks about all of the kinds of policies and opportunities and challenges that face downtown. So I think it's really just it's being engaged and having that dialogue with our members is so important. And in fact, that's one of the things we'll be talking about in Madison. I think in a couple of months we'll be up there for a very important and very exciting IDA conference.
That's right. We are hosting the IDA Place Matters Conference it's not April, May 13th through
Yeah.
May 15th. I promise to be there in May. We're excited. It's the first time Madison's ever hosted an IDA conference. All right. Last question, Andrew. I'm going to ask you to put
Okay.
your Nostradamus hat on. 2026 is a big year in politics. We just had the State of the Union, lots of things happening. As we all know, all House representative seats are up, and a third of the Senate is up. What are you predicting? What do you think will happen in 2026? We do know a few things, right? We know over the last 50 years or so, a midterm election with a newly elected president tends to go the other direction, aside from after 9/11. So there are a few things that have become relatively common, although nothing in politics right now is common. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What could happen with Congress when they are a new body in 2027?
Well, it's a great question, and I wish I did have a crystal ball, but I don't. I guess here's kind of how we're seeing it here in Washington. Take the House first. So the House right now, Republicans have a very narrow majority. It's like 220 to 215. Democrats would need to basically pick up a net of 3 seats in order to have a majority. Based upon the polling, based upon, as you said, the historic trends in a midterm after a presidential election, looking at the president's approval ratings, which are not great at the moment, and looking at the number of retirements of members, that's always a good sign. If a lot of members of Congress from one party or the other are retiring, that's a good sign. They might not feel very optimistic about their political future. Based upon that, I think most people think that there's definitely a better than 50-50 chance that Democrats would win back the House. Not a given, not a guarantee. And of course, the size of that, the size of that majority, if it happens, it could be 1 seat, it could be 20 seats. One thing I'll mention, one kind of, I don't know, out of left field thing, of course, is this redistricting, this mid-decade, mid-cycle redistricting, where you saw the president, pushing Republicans in Texas and other states to redistrict, and then Democrats kind of push back. But all of that chaos happening, and I don't think it's happening in Wisconsin. I'm not quite sure, but it looks like it probably comes out to be a wash, more or less. That the number of seats that Democrats may have picked up and Republicans probably comes out more or less even. So we're kind of back to that place where there's a good chance that Democrats will win back the House, but not definite, and by what size or what majority is unclear. Senate side, so right now in the Senate, Republicans have a 53-47 majority. So Democrats would need basically 4 seats to take a majority. If it's 50-50, J.D. Vance has a tie-breaking vote. Um, if you look at the kind of the map, as they say, the states and the races that are up, Democrats would pretty much have to win every race where that is even remotely competitive in order to get there. They have a couple of seats that are held by Democrats right now that are a little bit vulnerable: Georgia, Michigan, a few others, New Hampshire. There are some opportunities potentially for where Republicans might be vulnerable, like North Carolina, maybe Texas, maybe Ohio. But essentially, if Democrats want to win back the majority, they'd have to kind of, run the board, run the table, and basically win all of those seats. Chances are Republicans will be able to maintain a majority, and maybe smaller, and may even be bigger. We don't know. But what that means is, if I was to put on my hat and say the most likely outcome come 2027, you may have a Democratic-controlled House, still a Republican-controlled Senate, obviously Republican-controlled White House, and then the question is, well, are the parties able to negotiate and get things done, or is there just more partisanship and more yelling that leads to more shutdowns and things like that? And that I can't tell you. But regardless of what happens, from IDA standpoint, our view is whoever is in office, we're going to keep talking to them and reaching out to them. Wisconsin's great. Wisconsin, I think, has probably the most ideologically divergent Senate delegation in the country. I mean, Tammy Baldwin, Ron Johnson, not exactly ideological soulmates. And our approach, I know Jason's, I know everyone there is, doesn't matter. We're going to talk with and engage with everybody. And so regardless of the outcome, that's what we have to do. That'd be my best guess. You might see a Democratic House, Republican Senate, and of course, White House.
Well, we met with both Baldwin and Johnson, you and I
Yeah,
together, and both offices have been
we
willing to
did.
meet with us, and both offices have had very good conversations with. And of course, we're
Absolutely.
always thankful to meet with our House Representatives member, Mark Pocan team, and he's been gracious with his support of downtown Madison. Now, I remember you saying something. Aren't there only 3 states in America with divided Senate seats, or is it only 2 at this point?
I think it's 3. So yeah, so Wisconsin is one, Maine is the Maine, and then Pennsylvania, I believe, are the only 3 that have, which is you go back 30 years, it was maybe a third to a half of the country had, a D and an R in the Senate, and now it's only 3. Things have changed. But again, Wisconsin still is that crazy state that just says we want the most progressive senator and also the most conservative one, and we're just going to let them fight it out, which I think is interesting, but also kind of great in a way. It
Well,
says nothing is a given.
no, Wisconsinites, we love our purple, except for in football teams, which is hard, considering I'm the Vikings fan and everybody else is the
That's true.
Packers.
Yeah,
Yes. We can
that's
all
true.
agree
Well,
we,
I used to
we
like a team. I used to like a team called the New York Giants, but they haven't been in the league, I think, for a couple of years. I don't know. I think they left. I'm not
oh,
sure
come
where they
on,
went.
please. How many Super Bowls have you won in your lifetime?
Okay, 4. Fine.
Yeah, you know how many I've
Vikings.
won?
Yeah, I know. They're getting there. They're going to get there
0.
someday.
We'll
Fran
get there at
Tarkenton
some
will come.
point. I'm a young man still. We've got hope. Andrew, you give us hope. Thank you. You give us hope with all of the, certainly craziness at times that happens in Washington, D.C., to get this perspective and to find ways that organizations like ours and others across the country can help our downtowns, whether or not that's in public safety, that's in office conversions, that's in homelessness, you name it, these issues, they're very important, and we are going to need the assistance of our friends in the federal government. And thank you, Andrew, for your hard work in making that happen. We appreciate you and all of the leadership at IDA for this, for David Downey and Chris Larson, our board chair. You guys have done excellent work. So, Andrew, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate all of your assistance.
Well, thank you so much. And like I said, I'm happy to talk anytime. I got to get that Five Timers jacket. But also look forward, hopefully, I can get to meet some of you in Madison in a couple of months. So
Well,
I'm
the
really excited
cheese
about that. Never been
curds
there?
the cheese curds are on me. I will buy them for
Excellent.
you, take you to only the best places. Andrew, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We also appreciate our major series sponsors, our good friends at Sinair and our friends at Hush Blackwell and the Fiore companies for your support of the advocacy update. Hopefully, we'll see you all downtown sometime soon. Thank you for your support of DMI for downtown Madison. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Bye now.